And I might just begin by inviting each of you to state your name and position and take the oath or affirmation. So from Dogs New South Wales, Ms Lynn Brand.
Yes, Mrs Lynette Brand.
Lynette Brand, thank you.
On oath. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. Ms Crofts.
Deirdre Crofts, Dogs New South Wales. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Mr Michael Donnelly.
Yeah, Michael Donnelly, President Animal Care Australia. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Mr Davis.
Samuel Davis, Animal Care Australia Vice President. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Do Dogs New South Wales have an opening statement?
Yes, we do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. To the Honourable Catherine Cusack and members of the Committee of Inquiry, Dogs New South Wales welcome the opportunity to reply in person today, giving continued support to the intent of the Draft Animal Welfare Bill 2022 to provide the highest standards of animal welfare in all animals. Since the days of Prime Minister Paul Keating and Professor Hilmer, there has been a concerted effort to reduce unnecessarily regulation by state and federal governments. We need to question the need for any increased government intervention and new legislation and ask what purpose does it serve. For example, regulation of the number of litters per bitch and the limits on breeding age. If there is no need to be served, there should be no legislation. In addition, Dogs New South Wales already does regulate as per many of these regulations. The key areas which Dogs New South Wales have concerns in this bill are providing feedback on a document which refers to regulations that are not provided or complete, clarification on determination of excessive heat or cold, exhibited animals as a definition that affects our particular organisation, the transporting of dogs as in the definition of vehicle, powers to enter premises particularly are of concern to us as how this can be achieved without a warrant which is required by police to enter premises. We do object strongly to this and the lack of provision of appeal, which we think is a complete denial of natural justice. The level of penalty most would not be affordable by legal representation. There is no provision for witness or support which could lead to our member being fearful, intimidated and confused at the least. The question of surgical insemination. This question has arisen as to whether surgical insemination of bitches should be allowed. One might also discuss whether male children should be circumcised without anaesthesia. This discussion is outside the terms of reference of this inquiry. Surgical insemination is performed by registered veterinarians who are regulated already by a number of state acts, principally the Veterinary Practice Act 2003. Acts of cruelty are already covered under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1979. Veterinarians are also governed by a strict code of conduct. It is inappropriate and outside the terms of reference of this committee to sit in judgment of specific procedures within a long list of acts of veterinary science. Dogs New South Wales is the primary recognised body of registered canines in New South Wales, spanning many decades in areas where our organisation maintains health, physical and mental educational areas, where our members' dogs are involved in conformation showing sheepdog trials, earth dogs, agility, tracking, obedience, scent work and draft work, to say a few. Each of our members has a unique traceable membership number. All members' dogs have a unique identifying number. All members' dogs have an independent microchip number, which is verified in identifying a Dogs New South Wales registration certificate. All our members must complete a written theory examination before being allocated a breeder's accreditation, and all premises are physically inspected by a Dogs New South Wales approved premise prefix inspector before a breeder's prefix is issued. Our Dogs New South Wales Code of Ethics enforces restricted breeding of females with no more than 2 litters in 2 years and a minimum age of females to be bred for smaller breeds and larger breeds. Dogs New South Wales has a maximum number of litters that a female can have in a lifetime and an age limit on breeding.
Excuse me, I do apologise for interrupting. It's just that, just in terms of the terms of reference and the inquiry, I'm just wondering if you had any other brief comments in relation to an opening statement on the legislative framework.
The logistic framework, yep.
Thank you. Sorry, I do apologise. We've only got 45 minutes. So.
Okay, just in conclusion, we've demonstrated and actioned the intent of most areas of the above bill in its own regulations. There are, however, some incongruencies, and Dogs New South Wales look forward to continued collaboration with the Department of New South Wales Primary Industries in the support of all animal welfare.
Thank you. Thanks for your cooperation. Thank you. Does animal care...
Yeah, we do, thank you. Yep, Chair. I ask that first our statement be tabled, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
No problem. Animal Care Australia, or ACA, represents keepers and breeders of animals nationally. Our goal is to promote and encourage high standards in all interactions with the animals in our care. Firstly, to start off with, we have a new Animal Welfare Act with no definition of animal welfare. ACA has detailed recommendations in our submission, but some key points we'd like to highlight are: education to measurably improve animal welfare outcomes must be enshrined within the Act. The implementation of a companion animals welfare panel, similar to that of a stock welfare panel. Enforcement activities must be subject to strict accountability and transparency provisions, which are currently missing from this draft. These matters must be resolved, particularly given we have no draft regulations. We recommend this committee insist both the final bill and regulations are provided together for consideration of the New South Wales Parliament. ACA encourages animal welfare education over restrictive regulation. Education must be legislated to measurably improve animal welfare outcomes. In our open an opinion that the draft does not currently do this. Education includes the continued promotion of animal welfare standards and codes of practice. ACA is disappointed there is no requirement within the bill for key stakeholder collaboration or inclusion in the development, management and promotion of standards or codes of practice. This must be included in the Act. History tells us it should not be presumed that we would be invited to collaborate. As key stakeholders, we haven't been included on the Animal Welfare Advisory Council either. A companion animals welfare panel will provide an opportunity to alleviate the intimidation experienced by pet owners and to educate and improve animal welfare. ACA is astonished the draft bill, despite its title, is predominantly void of strategies for improving animal welfare outcomes. A minimum standard of care, although supported by ACA, does little to improve animal welfare. In fairness, the opportunity for this may exist within the regulations, but how would we know that when we have no draft regulations? For example, as has been previously stated by other witnesses, what would be exempt from or included as exhibited animals? This draft bill removes liability of the authorised officers and their organisations while making very little effort to improve their accountability or transparency. How can the New South Wales Government or the DPI claim the enforcers will be held accountable if they are not being held liable for their actions? Charitable organisations should not have the power to act as the police, prosecution, judge, jury and media all at once. This is widely out of step with all other legal structures in our society. And for this reason, ACA is calling for the prosecutorial powers to be removed from the charitable organisations. This should not come as a surprise to this committee, as several states have or intend to remove the RSPCA as prosecutors of cruelty cases for a range of reasons. Additionally, we do not support previous suggestions of allowing third parties to prosecute. We also call your attention to the submission from the Australian Privacy Foundation, which we fully support. The ambiguity of section 66.2 allows for the breeding of companion animals to be classed as a commercial activity and therefore voids the requirements of entry outlined in section 67 for residential premises. This is of great concern, potentially allowing the chaos of the recent dog audits to be repeated, but on a broader scale. We would like to thank the Chair and the committee for inviting us to appear here today, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr Veitch is going to ask the first question.
Thank you. Can I, Mr Donnelly, in the submission from Animal Care Australia, I think page 5, bottom of page 5 going on to page 6, you talk about the need to, the separate legislation relating to the breeding of dogs and cats be united under one department and not split across the current 3 departments. You talk about the fact that there's the Department of Primary Industries, Office of Local Government and the Department of Planning as it relates to zoning and planning laws. So why is that a problem, having those 3 departments in that process? And if it was to be brought under one department, then beg the question, which department?
To answer your last question, it would be the DPI under our current belief and understanding. They are predominantly responsible for animal welfare, and then all of the rest of these things do fall in under that thereafter. So even though the Companion Animals Act is supposed to be in relation to councils and how they behave and how they interact with approving DAs and things like that, there is no current reason why that can't be also taken over under the DPI. Our biggest issue is during all of these consultation processes, including with the upcoming review of Companion Animals Act that we've already participated in for their review of their online pet registry, we get to a point, we ask a specific question about can this be done or why is this being done, and the first response we get, that's outside our purview, that's that other department. So we're trying to deal with an issue of puppy farming, or we're trying to deal with an issue of dog breeding or cat breeding, and we're only being able to respond to a part of the issue because the rest of it falls under someone else's department. If it all fell under one department and it all was then able to be combined and we were able to be liaised with just one department and resolve a lot of these issues together, that way it would make a hell of a lot more sense.
The DPI does prosecutions, but it doesn't actually investigate.
Actually, DPI do investigate. They actually have inspectors that investigate exhibited animal licence holders. And they'd carry out the full audits and they carry out all of the investigations and they'd also then pursue the prosecutions where appropriate.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump there?
Okay, go.
Okay, thank you. Can I just, your opening statement, you spoke about the need for a definition of animal welfare. There's been lots of discussion around the objects of the bill over the last couple of days with this committee and in the submissions, but also within the definitions provided in the bill. What would be your definition of animal welfare? I guess the second part of my question is actually to do with the objects of the bill. So if it's not in the definitions, do you not think the objects of the bill adequately provide guidance around animal welfare?
No, the objects don't provide adequate guidance at all. And if you'll note in our submission, we actually recommend the changing of part of that, of one of those objectives to include more inclusion of that. And one of the biggest issues that we also find in relation to the objects is that they're split. It's like there's an object for regulation, there's no actual object to improve animal welfare. There's just an object that says we will protect animal welfare. There's a huge difference in just protecting what's there than improving it, which isn't that supposed to be the goal of a new act, of an Animal Welfare Act. We're supposed to be advancing our animal welfare. We're not supposed to be staying status quo.
Okay. And so do you have a definition?
And as for the animal welfare definition, Animal Care Australia is looking at a couple of different has looked at a couple of different definitions. Last week, one of the witnesses before you actually recommended one of the internationally recognised definitions. So far, that probably would be the one we would be going with, but I can take that question on notice and come back to you with which one we would prefer as a committee. I'd rather go back to the committee and lock that in before answering you.
Thank you, Chair.
I've got
Could I add to on what you're talking about with the objects? I guess ACA's main push is that we should really be spending the money on educating the community in general to improve animal welfare outcomes. And from our experience, I mean, a lot of DPI staff sort of say to us, well, that's for later. Later never happens. So we feel really strongly that that needs to be enshrined in the Act. Because at the moment, it's one of the objects, sort of, although it doesn't say improve, and yet there's really very little that follows anywhere within the Act to actually improve animal welfare outcomes across it. It all just becomes a compliance and enforcement document.
Bran, do you have any views about these matters?
Well, I do also. Deirdre can talk on this too, because Deirdre is our Animal Welfare and Liaison Community Officer as well.
Thank you.
Okay, with enforcement, I have to say, generally with the enforcement officers, they attend premises with the assumption of guilt, and then a person needs to prove their innocence. That is in contradiction with with common law. There should be the presumption of innocence. So I think there needs to be a greater focus on when enforcement officers attend a premises, that they're more open-minded. Hopefully, if we can get further education out to the general public, there will be increased animal welfare outcomes across the board, not just breeders or companion animals, livestock, whatever. All animals, pets, breeding dogs, whichever class they fall into. We need to get that education out there. I see that that is lacking in the community. We do a lot of education within our organisation. That is mandatory. There needs to be this education, but we need to spread it far and wide. And I know that the main enforcement body, they do training of their staff, but as to what they're training them for, I'm not too sure. They don't share that information. But there needs to be more collaboration. There needs to be a fairer approach across the board if we want to achieve better animal welfare outcomes.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Banasiak first, then to Ms. Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on an issue that was raised in both your submissions, and that was about the issue with the definition of what the commercial breeding is, and we tried to fix this, I think, last year or the year before, and the government's response was, well, now is not the time to do it. But now that we have an act before us, a whole new rewrite of an act, is now the time to get this right and solve that, clause that is being abused by enforcement agencies, where they're saying, because you've bred one dog in 3 years, you're a commercial breeder. It's now the time to get this right. Pretty simple.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment there. Definitely it needs to be addressed. In the draft bill, it references agricultural purpose, industrial purpose, commercial purpose. There is no definition in the bill for those terms. So we need clarity on that, definitely. How can we move forward and know the intent of the bill if there are no definitions and the supporting regulations, so that we can get a full picture of what this is intended to do?
And I'll tack in on that. We were just recently consulted on investigating or looking to advise on the implementation of a breeding licensing scheme that was promoted as being for larger or commercial breeders only by the previous minister. And yet we were then also expected to define what that commercial breeder might be. The department didn't define that. The minister didn't define that. We as key stakeholders were asked to define that. So we, as Mr. Banasiak has already pointed out, we tried to define that 12 months earlier. We were told by the department, we were told by Parliament, it wasn't the time to do that. Suddenly, we're now being put on the spot. We're going to be made the scapegoat out of that whole process, because whatever is actually determined as a commercial breeder, when other people that don't fit into that criteria come back and say, we don't agree with that, the immediate response is going to be, but you do, because the stakeholders have all determined this definition. That's not how this should be working. We all should be working together. A parliament and the key stakeholders should be deciding what is what type of breeder, and that commercial breeder should not just be defined by a particular ideology or a particular belief. It needs to be based around some fact, around some science, and we need to be able to all come to some form of agreement on that. Right now, we don't even have that. We're not even being advised by government what that is.
Just looking at it from a slightly different tact and the way that the draft bill is at the moment, so Section 67 basically talks about entry into residential premises, and it's, as I think Animal Care Australia recommended, that you either need a search warrant, or you need extenuating circumstance, an emergency, or permission of the occupier for residential premises. And we've got in there in 6 that a residential premises included all land used for residential purposes. So that's great, and that's a real positive. But then when we go back and look at Section 66, which is talking about access for the inspectors on other property, there's so many get out of jail cards, it all becomes a little bit, well, where are we going here? Like, once you're commercial, does that mean you're not residential? I don't know. The whole thing need to be really locked down. I think Section 67, we like Section 67. Section 66 then adds all these ifs and buts about what's a commercial premises that then creates so much doubt and provides the opportunity to then sort of, renege on Section 67 in essence.
And
the other thing I was just going to mention too, sorry Michael, is in terms of how these inspections are done, we see them, they should really be as a sort of I think you talked about the stock welfare panels, along that sort of line where people, I don't think inspectors in uniforms with tasers are the right people to generally be the first ones that go in and do these inspections. It should be a little bit, I'm familiar with the plumbing industry where a plumber, digs the hole, puts all the pipes in, and then an inspector comes and inspects that. Now, if the guy's not compliant, he doesn't get a fine. He's educated, and they sort of say, no, you need to use this sort of pipe now, or the standard's slightly changed, or whatever it is, and he fixes it, and he moves on with his life, rather than going in there sort of, guns blazing a little bit, which is a little bit what we've got at the moment. So to me, that's what these sort of compliance audits should be, and I believe that's what they are under the current Exhibited Animals Protection Act for zoos and wildlife parks. There's an understanding that the proprietors are working with those inspectors rather than the inspectors. I mean, ultimately, yes, they can fine them, but that's not the aim of the game. That's the end. That's the end part for people who are recalcitrant.
And if I can add, you're looking at currently you're looking at a definition or an interpretation of the commercial breeder based on a preface within the current breeding code of practice. It's not based on anything else written anywhere in the Act or the regulations. It's based on a preface that simply says this code of practice applies to anybody who owns and breeds dogs.
Sorry, can I just understand, are you saying that the current situation in the current legislation is inadequate and it's being put into the new Act and that's not acceptable? Is that the idea, or has it changed?
I can't answer that because I can't see the regulations to say if it is currently being put into the new Act, because that is where it currently does fit or sit, is within the regulation Schedule 1, and then it refers you to that breeding code of practice, which then refers you to a preface that says this code of practice applies to all dog and cat breeders. So until we see the regulations, I can't answer you, Chair. I don't know if that is exactly what we're saying. I guess what we are saying is that's our fear, that is going to carry through into the new Act.
Okay, and so you see, again, sorry to be so simple
right.
about this, but you see the new Act as an opportunity to make those policy changes that you've been asking for some time, and your fear is that it's not making those policy changes. Is that?
Yeah, that's
you
probably
think
a very
appropriate?
good. That's a very good summation. Yeah, absolutely.
And we'd be in agreement because there are no regulations.
And at
Yes,
the moment,
I hear what you're saying, and look, please forgive me because there are so many issues in the Act that this committee isn't in a good position to actually review all of those individual issues, particularly artificial insemination. So I mean, we're not. It is relevant, the fact that those comments are being made, but it's not a matter that we're not inquiring into artificial insemination. It's kind of more the bigger picture. So that was why.
It's just it was originally on the paper. It was, but it was never in the original consultation draft.
Yes.
And then it was put in there, and now we are seeing comment being made regarding artificial insemination. So it's either in the draft or it's not.
But that is very relevant to our hearing as to whether or not this matter has been correctly handled. Yeah. So would you like to talk about that?
I'd like to talk about our original consultation draft where it was never mentioned. So then all of a sudden, when the paper comes out for our response to what's been spoken about, it was never mentioned. And now we are talking about it today, and yet it was never originally in the original consultation draft for all stakeholders to respond to.
Okay.
So it was never on the table, and then it came to the table, and now we're talking about it. So we don't know where we stand on this issue.
On that issue.
But if it does come into legislation, and we've had no reply originally as an organisation, it has a great detriment to the breeding of purebred dogs in our country for our breeders, because we live so many thousands of kilometres away from.
Is it your impression that it is still in the legislation?
We have not been in writing been informed that it's been removed from the banned procedures.
Okay, so we're hearing from Gray. Okay, got you. Mr. Barrett, please.
No, sorry, Karen. I guess I think this is an opportunity for you to expand more on why you feel it shouldn't be in there as a prohibited list. Is that?
Yes, I'm certainly happy to expand on that. Our organisation basically is an organisation for breeders of purebred dogs, and to complete.
Can I just narrow the focus down? It's not necessarily the artificial insemination. I think we're not against that. It's the actual procedure.
Okay.
Surgical versus
Right.
transcervical.
Surgical versus transcervical, and I heard the end of your last person's comment. I'm not a veterinarian, but I did work within a veterinary practice for 20 years, witnessing both transcervical and surgical inseminations. In Australia, there are not that many registered veterinarians who have done specifically transcervical inseminations. In Melbourne, there's one specialist. In New South Wales, there's probably 2 specialists that I know of. In South Australia, there's 1 or 2. So given the relevance of the distance in Australia for a person to travel to get a transcervical insemination, as adverse to a frozen semen or a surgical insemination, the person is going to have to travel an awfully long way to find a person that is authorised or educated well enough to do a TCI. It's not just a matter of inserting a tube for 2 seconds. In my experience, some of the females that have had transcervical inseminations may stand there for 20, 25 minutes until the instrument can be inserted through the cervix. In many cases, those females have to be sedated, and it's not that comfortable for them. When you do a surgical insemination, the whole process takes approximately 17 to 20 minutes maximum. The female has an incision about that long made, and injected into her uterus is the semen. So she does not have her uterus cut open. The fact of the matter is also the amount of semen you have to use. 0.5 of a mil if you're doing frozen semen, 3 mils if you're doing TCI. Now we're talking about neutering and desexing dogs and cats. You're looking at 35 to 45 minutes to neuter a female or spay a female. That's a surgical process. So we're not going to neuter females anymore because it's a surgical process and we're worried that we're giving the dog an anaesthetic. We're also talking about neutering dogs at a younger age. If we do that, they're having an anaesthetic. We're also possibly suggesting spaying or neutering young animals, which ends up possibly in urinary incontinence and all sorts of other hereditary or other physiological problems.
Sorry, Ms Brand, can I say, I will allow you to complete your answer, but I just need to emphasise to you and to the members on this committee, we're not going to be making any findings about this matter.
Thank you.
So it's just that there's only 15 minutes left, and so I think it's in your own best interest that we...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I've got some questions, if
Please.
that's all right. Thank you. I'd like to go to Animal Care Australia. This morning we heard from people within animal research, and they said that they didn't want the Animal Research Act to collapse into one bigger act. They thought that it stood better on its own, and it kind of got complicated putting it together. And they were concerned about, well, some of them were concerned and some of them weren't so concerned, about large parts of the act then becoming regulations, and the fact that that can create some uncertainty. I wanted to ask for your opinion about the Exhibited Animals Act, because the same thing's happening to that act as well as the Animal Research Act. Do you have concerns, first of all, with the Exhibited Animals Act falling into this one larger piece of legislation, and do you have concerns that the majority of that act is becoming regulations?
When we originally submitted 2 of the discussion papers on that, we were in agreement on all of the acts being combined into one. Our assumption at the time, given the information we had at that time, was that we would actually be able to see how that was all going to actually happen. We aren't seeing how that is all happening. So yes, we do have concerns that what will appear in those regulations and what won't appear in those regulations. We were also under the assumption that a vast part of both the AR Act and the Exhibited Animals Act would actually have appeared in the Act, not all of it being transferred into the regulations. So until we see those regulations and we see what has potentially been changed or not changed, yes, we have concerns. Will we afterwards? Well, we hope not.
I'm not sure. You can't say at this point.
Yeah.
You also strongly oppose the minimum holding periods for charitable organisations, and you'd like to see animals kept for a minimum of 21 days. Can you explain the concerns you have and how it could go wrong if the minimum holding periods are reduced?
Yeah, minimum holding periods are being reduced for animals that are either unidentifiable, i.e. they don't have a microchip, or they're deemed to be a young animal, or they're deemed to be a feral animal. For the latter one, we have concerns about how they identify that animal to be feral, because nobody within any of the shelters has animal behavioural training or understanding. So how they're making that determination within 7 days is remarkable and phenomenal.
Can you just explain, for the benefit of the committee, what you mean by that? Like, I think I know what you mean with a cat in a cage sort of panicking, but just to kind of give us that real example of how can you not know if an animal is wild or not?
Well, I won't use your cat because you just used the cat. I'll use a pet rabbit as a prime example. Now, most pet rabbits are not microchipped, so strike one against the pet rabbit before we even start. Most rabbits only respond to their owner. So if you've now had a pet rabbit brought into a shelter and it's in a small cage, that rabbit will retreat, and it will continue to retreat. It will not respond to any person that's approaching it. It will actually react in fear. Strike two against that rabbit. That rabbit is now marked as being euthanized within the next 7 days. If it's not microchipped, nobody who has lost their pet rabbit has the opportunity to actually get the time to come back, announce they've lost their rabbit, and receive their rabbit. I'll go back to the dogs, the cats, and then all of the animals. With COVID right at the moment, we have had people hospitalised with COVID for up to a month, 3 months. How are they supposed to be able to know their animal has disappeared, has been lost, if it was not microchipped, and they're unconscious or in ICU in a hospital, to be able to respond within 7 days? 21 days, there's a better chance of someone declaring or seeing a lost and found ad and saying, oh, hang on a minute, I recognise that rabbit. The other issue that we have with all of this is that we've already had scenarios from our members who have lost a dog or lost a cat, have contacted a shelter, continued to contact that shelter, to be told by reception that that animal is not on our records, only to come back a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and be told, oh yeah, that animal was here, sorry, it's now either been adopted out or we euthanized it last week as per the end of the 14 days or 21 days that we had to hold that. It's because the system's not structured correctly to actually allow proper and appropriate tracing of animals, particularly those that are not microchipped. And not all animals are microchipped.
And I just want to nut in on that. I can see you've got a question too. Because we did talk about microchipping and mandatory microchipping, I think, in our last day. However, I think in your submission you talked about birds and reptiles and other animals. I'm assuming that there's no mandatory microchipping for those animals because you can't microchip.
You can't. That's right. You have a gecko that, is no thicker or longer than your finger, who sheds twice a month or constantly sheds. That microchip's not going to stay under that skin very bloody long at all. It's going to shed out, and you've now got an animal no longer microchipped.
Sorry, was that?
Yeah, my question was just about the cats and dogs. I think by law they have to be microchipped. So I don't get where's the breakdown of people, members of your organisation, not microchipping.
No,
I actually register my car as well.
Yeah,
but I still have to do it. And if I don't do it, I don't get the privilege of owning a car. Isn't it the same with a pet? If you don't microchip it, you don't get the privilege of owning a pet?
Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because I call back on, and I agree with Ms Hurst that it is expensive, but also more to the point, I come back to ACA's thing, education over regulation. You can go out there and you can ask the general public. They don't even realise that the Companion Animals Act requires them to do that. There are a lot of people who will purchase animals and they don't realise that they actually have a legal obligation to have that animal microchipped, or for that matter, to have a collar and tag on their animal when it leaves their property. If we go back to education...
Should we be requiring the seller to do that rather than the buyer?
It should be both, shouldn't it? It's your responsibility when you buy an animal.
Microchipped once, so should
Yes, but
we allow animals that are not microchipped to be sold?
Well, no, that's not supposed to be happening, but it is. So we need to then cover what the alternative when it's not happening. The buyer should be equally aware that that animal that they're purchasing should be carrying a microchip.
I guess there's obviously limited funding in this area, and it needs to be targeted at the most appropriate way that improves animal welfare outcomes across the state. Chasing people to, directly, having officers chasing people to check their animals are microchipped is probably not the best use of the funds. Educating the public so that they realise these sorts of things, and also the stuff that's in either the prescribed standards, or we're asking that even that the government sort of accepts standards that our clubs already have in place as a defence to crimes. That's a better, promoting that so that we raise animal welfare standards, I think, is a better use of funds than running around chasing people.
Can I just interrupt? Can I just interrupt there? I think we're chasing the people that are doing the right thing. We're not chasing the people that aren't microchipping. And the people that aren't microchipping are the people that are providing the bad animal welfare outcomes. They're the people that are breeding the dogs and the cats that are not microchipped. They're the people breeding multiple animals that are living in animal welfare issues. You're talking to people here that are parts of organisations that do microchip.
I was actually going to ask you that question. Isn't it all the people who are not in your association?
So we're here talking today about legislation where we can find fault in that we don't have regulations that we can necessarily come to grips with. But I think the bottom core of the whole matter is we're chasing people that you cannot identify. Their animals aren't identified, they don't microchip them, they sell them in car parks, they sell them for bags of cash money, and we have to somehow find those people.
Can I both organisations have suggested we need more education. Do you have any specific ideas about how that might happen?
I think it could start at a council level, in our area particularly where our Dogs New South Wales premises are, is Penrith Council. I think we should be inviting schools and we should be inviting veterinarians to come and talk about the fact if you own a pet that you purchase that's not microchipped, that is illegal. It's unlawful to sell a pet without a microchip. I don't think the general community really understand when they buy a pet, it's not optional, it has to be microchipped.
Do you have
I'd like to add to that, yeah. Definitely within all of the current breeder associations you could commence your education. I agree with Dogs New South Wales that local councils could also do it. But I think we need to go back and we need to start at the very beginning. We need to be educating our children. We need programs within the Department of Education in a primary and tertiary and secondary levels that actually educate our children on basic animal welfare and the basic requirements of keeping a pet. Animal Care Australia has currently been in discussions with the Animal Welfare League to do just that. And the Animal Welfare League, I'm very aware, is already proceeding and continuing with that and has done for the last 12 to 18 months. And we're happy to support them on that. That's where we need to be educating the most. We need to get our children to understand you own a pet, these are your responsibilities.
So I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you seem to be saying that for the law to be effective and for the reforms to work, people actually need to have awareness of what they are.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that there will be more compliance just by having more awareness of the law.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And in terms of the Act itself, when it comes in, we've only got standards and guidelines mentioned once as the prescribed ones. And I understand that for rodeos and maybe for breeding dogs and cats and so on, that you need some prescribed ones that are actually the law. But you also need to, with those prescribed ones, you have to get it out to the community so they know it even exists. We found that with this puppy farm task force thing. People didn't even know that those documents existed. And in my area, they don't, which is birds primarily. People don't know that there's a breeding keeping of birds code under DPI. Most people don't even understand that. But we have our own. We have our own internally within our systems. So there's an opportunity here to promote the minimum care standard that's in the draft bill, to promote the prescribed standards, it might be for rodeos or whatever it is, and also to accept the standards and codes, not as law, but as recommendations, and perhaps as a defence to any cruelty charges as well, so that they get some status, to encourage people and get that message out there to the public that these are the animal welfare codes of practice, standards, guidelines, etc., that the community expects you to abide by. And I really think it's critical when this Act is called an Animal Welfare Act. It's no longer a prevention of cruelty. It's an Animal Welfare Act that is enshrined in the Act, that must happen, that DPI must consult with all the stakeholders, that we must promote these prescribed standards, we must even promote the ones that clubs and other organisations such as Dog New South Wales have to improve animal welfare across the state, rather than just trying to thump the odd people
make the
that have to be
resources
thumped.
more accessible.
If I may, I can give you I can give you an example. Sorry, just very quick example. During the inquiry into circuses and exotic animals 2 years ago, it was revealed that in 2019 the DPI actually released a new code of practice for circus. Now, that's a very small group. Circus were not aware that code of practice had been released 6 months after it had been published. So if we're talking about a very small group there of circus, we're not made aware. How are we supposed to expect the entire public to understand these acts exist if we don't tell them?
Very good point. Can I just ask Ms Crofts, yes?
I just want to say that there is a responsible pet ownership program conducted in schools, and it's conducted at all levels. And that has been really valuable in getting responsible pet ownership message, microchipping, laws, etc., to kids of all ages.
Sorry, who conducts that?
Sorry?
Who conducts that?
That's the state government.
The Department of
Office of Local Government.
Office of Local Government, thank you.
Yep,
Yes.
Office of Local Government. They adopted the program that was created in Victoria probably 20 years ago or more now. I actually worked as an instructor in that program for a short while, and it was very beneficial to the kids. The education needs to expand to their parents. We would provide material that the kids could take home to the parents, but whether it actually got there, who knows. So it's getting the message to the adults in the community about responsible pet ownership. So there is that responsible pet ownership program conducted in schools. It has been on a hiatus because of COVID, but they are recruiting again at the moment, so it's still continuing.
It does sound like local government were well placed to be delivering that program to their communities.
They were driving the education side of it, so
Thank you, that's really
it
helpful.
was very good. But I'd just like to make a quick comment on the exhibited animals section in this draft bill. It is a big concern to us. Currently, under the existing legislation and the regulations, companion dogs and cats are exempted from any licensing or permit holding. We haven't got any regulations with this draft bill. We don't know what the intent, what the future will be. But I can say if we are reclassified and are required to have permits, licensing, etc., it will decimate Dogs New South Wales purebred breeders and any other purebred organisation, as we won't be able to show our dogs and cats at agricultural shows. Those shows bring huge business into the towns that they're conducted in, with accommodation, cafes, restaurants, supermarkets. They bring in a lot of business to the local communities around the state. Everyone looks forward to the show coming to town, basically. And if the exemption that we currently have is removed, it's game over.
Thank you. I was actually just camping in Bermagui campground, and all these dogs came in, and I thought, oh no, there must have been hundreds and hundreds of dogs.
Yep.
And there was not one peep out of one animal the entire time.
It's huge every
astonishing,
year.
but I mean, just the care that those dogs get was
Absolutely huge.
And can I relay that? I know other animal groups too. I know there's something like 500 odd events, competitions and so on in the bird area, and obviously every animal area has the same. The exemptions that are all listed at the start of the Exhibited Animals Act at the moment, surely we have to ensure that those are carried over, so that all those sort of competitions are not dragged into into the same regulations as zoos and wildlife parks and so on.
It's a message we're hearing loud and clear.
And we'll have an opportunity this afternoon. You've really helped us to know what good questions to ask the government on that particular topic. Look, I'm afraid our time has expired. Can I just say to Animal Care Australia, I note that you had a closing statement, but can you please accept that that is going to be taken on board and noted
Sure.
in the report?
Sure.
Did you have any other issue that you felt that we've missed that you'd like to refer to?
Just briefly, I'm a bit concerned about section 89, where a public service employee can be nominated to be an enforcement officer. That is just too broad. And it can be unconditional, so we need to see the regulations, what the criteria of the expanded role of enforcement bodies, that's going to encompass. It seems that they're bringing in all these extra classes of people to do enforcement, and I'm just very concerned that it's leading to overreach. So, and whether these people would have any animal-related experience.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will pursue that. And can I thank all of you for your evidence and your care for animals. It's very obvious and very greatly appreciated, and you've really assisted this committee to know what questions to ask as we pursue the inquiry. If any questions have been taken on notice, the Secretariat will be in touch with you after the transcript becomes available, and there is a 21-day period, plenty of time. So thank you, and I'll adjourn this hearing now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll reopen the hearing. Thank all of our